Hey everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking Blackmagic raw footage and color grading it to look like film using Dehancer Pro. If you're not familiar with Dehancer Pro, it's a very good film emulation plugin that you should be using. If you'd like to try it out, be sure to use promo code AustinSmith at checkout to get 10% off your purchase. All this footage will be linked in the description below so you can download it and grade along with us. Before we get into the clips, let me show you my project settings. My color science is DaVinci YRGB color managed. Color processing mode is HDR DaVinci wide gamma intermediate. Output color space is Rec 709A. To start off, let's just take a look at what's actually happening light wise. A good way to do that is let's add a node using Option S. We're actually going to stick a false color onto the image, and this was shot with the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. Red is overexposed, so detail loss, and then anything in purple is detail loss. So false color is a really way to look at the exposure and where light is rolling off, what's happening with the light in different parts of the image. So ideally what I like to do is have skin tone land in between green and pink. But I also don't really mind overexposing, but maybe a stop or two. So as you can see in her face, I'm a little overexposed. And then up here in the window blinds, I'm overexposed. And sometimes you can't really adjust the exposure for like your crazy highlights because then everything is just going to be dark. With this on, let's go ahead and adjust our exposure. We're going to change it to clip. Let's pull it down and kind of see. Yeah, so here some parts of her forehead are just going to be overexposed. So I'm actually going to go back to 0 and maybe find a happy medium right there. Keep in mind this area is purple and blue, which means it's really low on exposure. So this is where we're at. Again, I mean, this is a moody, contrasty image. And one of the first things I would like to say before we really even get into Dehancer Pro, when you're making cinematic images, it's about enhancing what's already there. We're not there to go in and make nighttime and shadows look like broad daylight. We're not going in and just revamping the image. Ideally, what we want to try to do is keep the spirit of the image moody, contrasty. We want to apply a film look to it, which we'll do here in a minute with Dehancer, and just enhance the qualities of the image. We're not trying to make it anything it's not. This image we shot with the Blackmagic 6K, and we intended it to look like this. We knew it was going to be contrasty. So in the color grading, we don't want to ruin our efforts. We're in here to add expression to just enhance the image. So we're going to go into Dehancer Pro. Stick it on there. So according to the manual, when we have our project settings set up like this, the DaVinci YRGB color managed, HDR DaVinci wide gamma intermediate, and Rec 709, they tell you to switch this to DVR YG/intermediate. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to change our print profile to Kodak 2383 print film. Film when it's developed, this is the profile, so Kodak Vision 3250D. So when you see the rolls of film, that's like the film going into a film camera. And then the print is going to be after it's shot, after the negative film is shot, it's exposed and developed and it's printed onto Kodak 2383 print film. And so that's what you would see if you went to a theater and it's being projected on a big screen. You'll notice when I switch it from linear to Kodak 2383 print film, it's imparting a lot of contrast. The next thing we're going to do on film grain is we're going to switch to the 65mm ISO 50. The reason why we're doing that is just it's easier to get just a good look on the image without all that grain, and then we could go in and add more grain later. Obviously it's way too moody and contrasty, and this has to do with the film profile we're using. We're using a Kodak Vision 3 250D. Each one is for a different lighting scenario basically. And the D stands for daylight balance and the T stands for tungsten balance. So we're going to switch this to Kodak Vision 350D, and you can see here less contrast. The next thing I'm going to do is we're going to go to our film developer. And what this basically is just basically creating your own development process. Another goal I have with color grading, especially with Dehancer Pro, is I'm very much a purist in the sense that I want to do the least amount to the image as I can while making it still look as great as possible. So we're going to start with Film Developer, enable it, and we're going to just add some color boost. Really liking that. I love the contrast. What I don't like is we're actually obviously clipping down here. And another way to help, if you're getting clipping and you just want to see where you're clipping at, if you go to monitor, you can go to clipping indication and turn that on. And it's going to show you where you're actually clipping. So right here, technically I'm only clipping right in the bottom right hand corner, but I want to raise just the overall darkness. I don't want to raise everything because I really do like where my highlights are. I like having the brightest parts of my image around 896. So we're going to go to expand. And we're going to take the black point and just see what we can do. Okay, so we've raised the black point. Let's go to our push-pull. So the push-pull slider, when you develop film, before color grading, before like a digital intermediate, like what we're doing here, color timers, and they're still being used, like Christopher Nolan, he uses a color timer. And so basically you can expose negative film for a certain amount of time and you pull it out depending on how you want it to be exposed. And so basically that'll change like anything from exposure to your contrast to your color levels. So this is basically emulating that. So we're going to take this push-pull. I really like that. And I could go for some more color. And then to finish off, let's actually take away some contrast and this gamma correction. We're going to see what we can kind of do. If you're familiar with the tools like contrast and pivot, they kind of act the same way. This is kind of shifting. Here you can see like the middle. It's not doing too much with the darkest parts of the image or the brightest parts of the image. It's just kind of going in the middle. It's like if you were to go to your gamma slider on here on just a normal node. Let me show you that. Shift S. It'd be kind of like if you went to your gamma and went up or down like that. That's kind of what we're doing, but we're doing that inside of Dehancer Pro. Let's go ahead and label that too. The last thing I would like to do is go in and use color head. And I do want to push some colors a little bit. Like I want to add some cyan. Let's add some yellow. And let's actually turn the preserve exposure all the way down. What that's going to be doing is kind of working against what you want to do. If you want to stick with a pure photochemical process, as if you're not being in digital intermediate, you really have to limit yourself on the color head to only red, green, and blue. To kind of stay pure to what a photochemical process would be, I'm going to limit myself to just red, green, and blue on here. Maybe let's go for a warm. And then we're going to go in the shadows tone right here. And highlights. Then halation right here. We're going to enable that. And then let's go one last thing. Let's go up to the film profile and let's see if we can just kind of sweeten it up a little bit. So this is before and that's after. We did raise the exposure a bit, but it's one thing if you're shooting the material. However, if you're color grading someone else's material and you're just getting the footage into color grade, it's really best to analyze how they exposed it and color grade and just using that vibe to it. You want to assume that when they shot that, they intended it to look like that. Like you're only there to make it look better, like enhance it. Our next clip, this will be fun. So all these clips I haven't even touched yet. Like in this session, I've just dropped them in. So the exposure on this one is so we're gonna take false color. We're just gonna kind of see where everything's at. Obviously it's overexposed. I was shooting this one on a gimbal, so as you're going through just a natural daylight, you're gonna have some parts where you expose one way, then as you're on the gimbal, the sun decides to just come out and tell everybody hi. So you gotta go in and maybe bring it down. You can see her skin is actually pretty well exposed. Everything else is like really overexposed or kind of like in the same like one stop above. Again, we're trying to shoot between green and pink, but I don't mind if we overexpose a little bit. I do, however, want to find a more medium ground where her face is exposed well, but then it's not like super crazy exposed out there. What I'm actually going to do is drop this down to 400, and we have more that's exposed. Her right cheek here is like a pink, which is like one stop overexposed. It goes into green and then goes off. This is really nice to notice too. I'm gonna put it full screen here. When you're doing cinematography, and this is like not even like a color grading thing, but it helps. Like if you're shooting your own stuff and you're color grading it, getting this stuff right in camera goes such a long way because you can only color grade so much. So we have pink right there, we go into gray, go into green, then we go into underexposed on her right, and that creates a shape on her face. Let's turn off the false color. The light is going from right to left. It's just creating a nice shadow right there. It's already one thing to color grade and make something better. It's another thing entirely to color grade, but you're also like performing surgery to get a photo back to life. Like this video is dedicated to footage that's already kind of shot well and then color grading it. We're going to take Dehancer Pro. I put it on there and literally the same input as last time. DRV WG intermediate profile to this 2383 print film. And this is a pure case example. I switched the grain to a little bit lesser profiles because it's really hard to work with that much grain. Let's go ahead and turn on our halation. The Dehancer Pro plugin really desaturates your footage, and what I've noticed about Blackmagic footage is it's not super crazy saturated to begin with, and that's great because then you can kind of saturate whatever you want to, and it's not just like, hey, you're stuck with me. So what I typically like to try doing is going into the film developer, enable, and then just giving it a really big color boost before I really get too into the grading, just to kind of see where all the colors are falling. I actually really like how this looks. I mean, it's a little blue there. I mean, man, I will take some contrast out of it. I will go into film compression, and what this does is it makes your footage look less digital. And like how it does that is it takes the brightest parts of your image. I'll hit enable and you'll see what it does is it just kind of lowers it and compresses it to where it pushes your highlights and the brightest parts of your image more into the mid range. So you'll see there what that does. And actually, once I do that, I actually want to go back and add some more contrast. Maybe let's go to expand. And then let's go to our push-pull setting. Oh, okay, I really like that. So we're actually gonna pull it later. And then I'm really liking that. We're gonna go for just like she's going to a picnic. So we're gonna be all about that color. The last thing I'd like to do on this one, let's go to our color head, turn preserve exposure all the way down, enable it, and let's some cyan in there, and let's go to our mid-tone. Yes. And it's okay if you do this. I'm actually going to go back to color boost, adjust that. And this plugin is very much like that. You're kind of going up and down, up and down. 250D looks good. And there's no shame in doing this. Like, say you get to a certain point and you're like, man, it's just not there. Like, what I'll do sometimes is go to, let's try a 200T, and I'm like, it's a little red, but I might actually like this more. 250D is just so contrasty. Kodak Vision 3 200T is really good to use for maybe if the sun is more morning or it's like straight on, and so you kind of have warmer tones. Yeah, so if we use something like that and then actually go back into add some contrast, and then like we're really just kind of finessing at this point. I'd say it's done. I like it. I mean, with this one, I may would go in and do some more work, but I mean, at this point, we're 90% there. It's all about staying within that barrier of like, it's, you know, sun's like maybe afternoon. It's definitely not high noon. And we don't want to get into a situation where we're just making our own daylight or our own just like kind of make-believe lighting situation. Here's where we started. Here's where we ended. If I were to do anything going back to it, and I go to film compression and turn that off, I actually kind of like that. Like, I think my highlights were just too far down. So that's more of a finished product for me. This one here, I know because we shot it, the lots of tungsten light. And on this one, before we even look at false color, I actually want to go in and put a circle mask on her forehead because this one needs to be color balanced a little bit before we get into Dehancer. So put the circle on her head. I hit this highlight button up here, change this to vector scope, and yes, you can see. So if you don't know, this line right here is called the skin tone line, and what we want to do is get our skin tone on that line. So we're going to change this to clip. The tricky thing is on the right side, window light is coming in, but there's a good amount of tungsten light. So we're going to try moving the tint 29, and then we're going to try to go to, we're going to see what 45 is. So 4500 is a good temperature if you have like mixed lighting, like a good amount of daylight, a good amount of tungsten. So we're going to go there. So we're going to change our tint to 11 and our color temp to 4536. Yeah, that's good. And you'll notice as you move your color temperature, your tint will need to be moved too, so keep that in mind. That might not be like perfect, but that's pretty spot on. So here you have daylight coming in from the right, but you also have the lights in here, in this arena where the horses are. The lights in here are kind of green, but I mean, when you're out running and gunning like this, you can't really control everything. And so I just leave it. All right, let's get in here and look at our false color. I don't think we'll have to make too many like adjustments, if any, but I mean, again, it's always helpful to just look at it and see like, yeah, like it's basically perfect. It's still good to look at it to just like know like what you're working with, just so that like you're not trying to make the image something into it's not. Like light's obviously coming from here, it's rolling off to her left, and then there's this brick wall here, and then everything on the left is pretty underexposed, which makes for a pretty good cinematic image to start with, is because the light is just going from right to left. We're getting a good Rembrandt lighting on here. What Rembrandt lighting is half of her face is in shadow, but then she has this triangle underneath her left eye. So let's go into Dehancer Pro. Change this to the intermediate setting. On this one, let's start with 50D. I'm gonna try this one. Because I mean, again, like 50D, it's daylight balanced. Most of the image is daylight anyway, so we're gonna see about that. We're gonna print it to Kodak 2383 print film. The reason why I'm using Kodak and not like Fujifilm is because Dehancer recommends to whatever film profile you have, use that as your print also. So profiles Kodak, prints also Kodak. We're going to go to the grain here, and this is a good habit to do, is just taking your grain and minimizing it to this 65mm ISO 50. Turn halation on, and then just like the other clip, we're going to go into Film Developer and add in some saturation just to kind of see what's going on. You don't have to keep that saturation, but you kind of know like where your colors are landing. Wow. This makes my job really easy. Don't you just love it when you move one slider and it just makes everything? I mean, I'm really close to crushing the blacks, and I kind of am. Maybe you kind of do something like this and just the itty bitty. Not even that. I mean, the image was great, honestly, before we even started, so I'm actually really happy with that. So we've color graded 3 clips right here, and I have 3 more on the timeline ready to color grade. However, I'm going to save those for the next video. We have this shot right here where it's a walk and talk shot. I'm thinking about making that black and white shot. We have one in here in the kitchen where it's a very low-key setup. And then I have a shot right there that we took at the State Fair. So if you'd like to see me color grade those shots, stay tuned for the next video and we'll continue color grading.